So now that you know the basics of collision domains, we're now going to turn our attention to broadcast domains. So what is a broadcast domain? Well, a broadcast domain is a network segment, and when we talk about network segments, we're going to refer to local area networks. It's a network segment in which devices on the network segment receive Ethernet broadcast messages. So a broadcast domain is where broadcast messages can occur. And remember, when we're talking about broadcast messages, that is one to all. And a couple of examples of protocols that we've already talked about that utilize broadcast messages, and that's the ARP protocol and the DHCP protocol. So for example, if we have a new desktop on the network and they need to find out what the MAC address of a device is, they'll send out an ARP request. It's going to go to every other computer on that network, and only the one with that MAC address will respond. Same thing for DHCP. If we need to pull an IP address from a DHCP server, we have to send out a request. Well, when we send out that request, we don't know which device is the DHCP server, so it goes out to every single device on that network, and only the DHCP server will respond. Now, when it comes to broadcast messages and broadcast domains, only hubs and switches forward broadcast messages, routers don't, and this is very important. So let's talk about why routers do not forward broadcast messages. So for example, in this diagram, we have two broadcast domains. We have, let's say, for example, over here, we'll call this LAN number 1. And on the other side, what we'll do is we'll call this LAN number 2. And even though we have this directly connected, let's go ahead and let's call this the internet. And let's assume that it's potentially more than one router. And I'll go ahead and just signify that with a very ugly looking cloud. So why do we not send broadcast messages outside of a network from one router to another? Well, if we think about broadcast messages, they're very inefficient and they're very resource intensive. So if you think about it, a switch or a hub is going to have to send a broadcast message to every single device on the network. And as you can imagine, it can slow down the network, and it's also very resource intensive because if we're sending lots of broadcast messages, it can slow down our network. Now, there's something that's actually called a broadcast storm, and I recently actually had that happen last week with one of my docking stations where it just decided to go wacko and start sending out ARP requests nonstop. It actually took down my entire internal network, and I had to shut it off to figure out what was going on. I had to troubleshoot and determine that it was coming from that and turn it off to get my network to operate again. It essentially just took my entire small home office local area network down and offline altogether. So if we look at my example, I maybe have 5 to 10 connected devices on my wired network. But if we're talking about a wide area network, the internet, or an office space with several different routers connecting multiple different local area networks together, if routers allowed broadcast, it could essentially take the entire wide area network or the internet down altogether. I say on the slide that internet performance would drastically decline, but in all reality, due to broadcast storms, it would probably be similar to what is called a denial of service attack and essentially take down portions of the internet altogether. So for that reason, routers do not forward broadcast domains. So the switch is going to try to send it to every device, including the router. The router is going to get it. It's going to say, nope, I'm not going to forward that. Same thing with the hub. The hub's going to send it. The router's going to look at it and say, nope, I'm not going to forward that. I do not forward broadcast domains. Keep it within your local area network. I will not send it out to other networks. So that's what a broadcast domain is. And it's a really important point to point out that it really pertains only to a local area network. Broadcasts do not go outside a local area network. They do not go over wide area networks. Routers will get them and they'll drop them and they won't forward them. So that's a broadcast domain. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.